it's actually still very hard to hear, but for a different reason. That's because apart from Christ, we are still able to do many things. Apart from Christ, we are able to raise money through fundraising events. Apart from Christ, we can still send volunteers to do good works around the neighborhoods or for the homeless. Apart from Christ, we can still hold church services and strive hard to invite people to come. And on a personal level, even apart from Christ, we can accomplish many things in our careers and in our relationships. But what Jesus is saying is this: apart from Jesus, we can have church services with good music and preaching, but we do not really have worship of God. Apart from Jesus, we can have biblical and theological information to people, but they won't increase in faith or follow God. And apart from Jesus, we can organize and do ministry, but we will never reflect the love of Christ and the character of God. And we can have the best food for lunch after church and a fun social time. Nothing wrong with that, but without Jesus, we will not have real Christian fellowship. And on a personal level, we can accomplish many things. We can be making more money or enjoying a new relationship, but without Jesus, we may not be following the will of God. A few months ago, I read this article in the Presbyterian Outlook, it's a magazine, and it's about this church in the East Coast that has $700,000 in their bank account. The reason this article was featured, or the reason the article featured this church was not because the church was very good with its money. They weren't being shown as an example of a church that was good in stewardship and finances. The reason the church was featured was this: it was closing down due to lack of members. Imagine that. A church that has $700,000, but it is closing down because it had no members. Now, I don't know the full story, but there's one thing for sure. Even with all that money, somehow the church is now set to do nothing for the kingdom of God. In reality, without Jesus, all that we can accomplish is nothing. No matter how much resources we have or don't have, we accomplish nothing of spiritual value without Jesus. Jesus invites us and encourages us to abide in Him. We need to remain faithful and obedient to Christ no matter what happens, instead of relying just on ourselves and just on our own power. We need to pray to Him for every decision, discern His will, and move with His power. I have a story about a Carnival cruise ship. The name of the ship is Triumph. On February, a couple of years ago, 2013, there was a fire that broke out in the engine room of this cruise ship. This fire knocked out the ship's power, leaving this vessel drifting away in the sea in the Gulf of Mexico. More than 4,200 passengers and crew were left in limbo. The lost power made it impossible to operate the flush toilets. It damaged the ship's ability to preserve and cook all the perishable food that was on board the ship. Passengers reported long lines for food, shortages of fresh water, illnesses, and widespread boredom. Many passengers slept in the hallways or outside in order to escape the bad odors and the heat, especially below decks. CNN called the cruise ship Triumph the cruise ship from hell. But like any other good cruise ship, the Triumph has, it has really good features. It has many onboard dining options. It has a nice, fun Twister's water slide. It has an in-house comedy club in addition to the other shows that's available in the ship. It has a good spa and a nice-looking nice looking rooms and other staterooms. But without power, it wasn't a luxury ship. It was a cruise ship from hell. The ship, 4 days later, eventually ported safely in Alabama, and news crews riding in helicopters followed the ship and watched all these passengers begging for help. The ship's loss of power was tragic. It was a tragedy for the passengers. And Carnival Cruise Lines lost hundreds of millions of dollars due to the incident. So Carnival learned their lesson. Later that year, when Triumph sailed again, they outfitted the ship with new emergency power capabilities. Just to make sure they have power as they resume their responsibility. Likewise, what I'm saying is, without abiding in Jesus, Jesus is the source of our life and power, we actually accomplish nothing that really matters to God. Jesus invites and encourages us to abide in Him. And it is only through Him that we can bear fruit. Without Him, we can do nothing of spiritual value. We need to discern His will and move with His power and guidance. We need to remain faithful and obedient to Christ no matter what happens, instead of relying on ourselves, our own power, our own resources. Now, the circumstances of our lives may change. Our resources and relationships may change. But no matter what happens, Jesus invites us to continue abiding in Him. Because it is only through Christ, His guidance, His care, and His power